You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tan. In addition to this show, I write for the Packers Post and for Cheesehead TV, and Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, 2 days of this draft in the books. But before we get to that, I know there's something else you want to talk about real quick.
Yeah, I love talking to you, Gil, as much as possible. But before we get started, a few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. And Gil, Day 2, it's in the books. We're wrapping up the draft this weekend, and it always seems to mark the look of a great organization if you can really take advantage of rounds 2 and 3. And if you have extra picks in those rounds too, because you're not always going to have a bunch of first-round picks that you get to mess with. But if you can capitalize on Day 2 and Day 3, makes a good organization into a great organization. I think the Packers did very well on Friday.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm very happy with most of these picks. And again, I am sort of still in the mode of trusting the process on those that I have some questions about.
Yeah, and that first pick that they made tonight, they were slotted for pick number 41. That was the pick they acquired from the New York Jets in the Aaron Rodgers trade. They traded back from number 41 with the New Orleans Saints for picks number 45, number 168, number 190. So they gained 2 extra picks because of moving back 4 spots. And you have to think they moved back because who went number 40 right in front of number 41 was Cooper DeJean, our number 1 draft crush, the corner from Iowa, who everyone thought was bound to be a Green Bay Packer this weekend. But he's going to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now the Packers will see him down in Sao Paulo in week 1 coming up in September, which is pretty crazy to think that he's going to be on the other sideline and not the Green Bay sideline. But with that 45th overall pick, though, the Packers drafted Texas A&M linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, the first off-ball linebacker selected in the 2024 draft. And it sounds like, Gil, on paper, he may be the best one that was available in this draft this year.
Yeah, I really liked this pick. And the thing I like about it the most, you take Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper and put them on the field at the same time. You've got 2 guys with a lot of speed who can cover sideline to sideline, and you've got guys who can just do a lot of different things from that off-ball linebacker position.
Look at the team that they're chasing in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers. Fred Warner is outstanding. Dre Greenlaw is really good. You need to have 2 linebackers who can absolutely cover all sides, every side of the field and all angles, and just know how to play that position. I feel like this is going to be a really good compliment to Quay. And I feel like for Jeff Hafley, this is a guy, if you look at what he did at Texas A&M, he had 10 sacks his final year at Texas A&M as a linebacker. You can move him all around. He's an excellent blitzer. He's really, really relentless in the run game. He's someone who's going to hopefully help improve the run defense, which has just been an Achilles heel for so long in Green Bay, for as long as we all can remember. 9.34 relative athletic score. Gil, obviously, we know that Gutekunst loves his athletes. He's 6'2", 230 pounds. That's what he's listed at. 22 years old, turns 23 in November. And he actually led the SEC, which is no slouch for bad football. No slouch when it comes to football, and produced a ton of great football players every year. Led the SEC with 17 tackles for loss in 2023. Texas A&M had a lot of issues last year. Edgerrin Cooper was not the reason for that.
Yeah, no, he wasn't one of those issues. That's a certainty. And, he can blitz the quarterback. He can drop back into coverage. He can help against the run. Maybe the one knock on him perhaps is he can get lost a little bit with blockers. He'll have to learn a little more technique to try to disengage from them. And maybe his size is not perfect for what scouts look for. But overall, as a second-round pick, like you said, a lot of people had him ranked as the top linebacker available in this draft. And I think he's a very good fit for Jeff Hafley's defense as far as what he wants to do with his off-ball linebackers.
And no disrespect to Isaiah McDuffie. I thought he played very well. I thought he was better than Devondre Campbell a year ago, but you could not go into training camp with Isaiah McDuffie as your number 2 off-ball linebacker. That just wasn't going to be a good solution. I think Isaiah McDuffie is a number 3 linebacker. I think he's itched himself a pretty nice role in that area. The report, though, I read, though, also, and this could be a lot of fodder and talk and everything like that, where the Packers were reportedly considering drafting Cooper in round 1 on Thursday night. They were considering drafting him 25th overall instead of Arizona's offensive tackle, possibly guard with the Packers coming up, Jordan Morgan. And that was going to be possibly, arguably, the biggest reach of the night, along with the Michael Penix pick in Atlanta. But if that was the case, where they had a first-round grade on entering Cooper Gill, and they were able to trade back in round 2 and still get him and get a guy who's probably going to start right away, that's a win. That is a big win.
Yeah, I mean, that you had the board fall the way it did. And, I am very thankful for all the wide receivers that got drafted.
No kidding.
Players, who got picked ahead at positions you knew the Packers were not looking for. And that was definitely helpful. And like you said, it's a home run when the guy you wanted or considered strongly taking late in the first round, you trade back in the second round and still are able to pick him up. It's a positional need, and it's one of the, if not the top player at that position. I really like this pick for the Packers.
That's an ideal scenario for if you're general manager Brian Gutekunst. Just it's what every GM wants, just the board to fall in their favor. And Brian Gutekunst, he's shown over the years he is very good at just sticking with the board and reading the board and letting the board come to him instead of reaching for something that he wants to make sure he covers a need instead of just letting the best guy fall to him. The Packers, obviously, that was first of their 2 second-round picks. Second round, first of 2 second round. Yeah, I said it right. I'm going crazy. It's getting late here. The Bucs lost tonight against the Indiana Pacers. I'm annoyed. So, but the Packers helped lift my spirits tonight on draft night on day 2 of the NFL draft. Pick 58 overall, Georgia safety Javon Bullard was drafted by the Packers. 5'10", 198 pounds, ran a 4.47 40, relative athletic score of 8.25, only 21 years old. But, Gil, Georgia guys, Gutekunst loves him. Not surprising that Javon Bullard ended up being the first safety selected in this year's draft and happens to be another Georgia kid.
Yeah, Georgia defenders, we just seem to gravitate toward them here. But, again, you go back to trying to fit these draft picks in as pieces of a puzzle. And if you recall what Jeff Hafley said about his safeties, he wanted the 2 safeties to be interchangeable, where you line them up and you don't know which one is going to play in the box and which one is going to drop back into coverage. And Javon Bullard fits that description to a T. And you team him up with Xavier McKinney, and that is just like a perfect puzzle piece fit for what Jeff Hafley said he wanted to run on this defense. And all of a sudden, safety goes from a position of deep need to, wow, we may just have something here.
Yeah, and the thing is with Javon Bullard, too, he's not just a safety. He's got experience as a slot corner as well. And that is such a huge need, too, where, again, it's just we talk about the versatility along the offensive line, how Green Bay likes to build that O-line to make sure they get their 5 best on the field. Now you got a defense that you got a lot of interchangeable, versatile dudes who can move all around this defense and really mess with the opposing offense. Appears to be a guy, though, also who's not afraid to hit. And at Georgia, you better know you better not be afraid to hit someone. And Georgia is Georgia for a reason. They're one of the elite defenses in college football year in and year out under Kirby Smart, who's a brilliant defensive mind. And they just produce great NFL players all the time. And Javon Bullard could be another stud in the NFL that comes from that Georgia defense, a guy who has who won 2 national titles with the Bulldogs too.
Yeah, and came up big in big games over the course of his career. And one of the things I loved about the scouting report, here's a guy that people are saying could be a future coach because he just knows the game so well, and he has that competitive juices, that also help him. But his football IQ, the way he sees the entire field, is outstanding. And defensive MVP of the national title game a couple of years back. Here is a guy who knows the game well, thinks the game well, comes up big in big games, and not only was he the MVP, defensive MVP of the national championship game, but at the Senior Bowl he was voted the best safety on the American team. So again, you put him in big situations, he seems to come up big. This pick, I think, out of all the picks we made today, is the one I like the most.
And it's another Georgia player trading the Georgia Bulldog G for the Green Bay Packer G, and that's
switch colors.
It's a pretty cool thing, and obviously he's going to get. You got to imagine he's going to get comfortable pretty quickly with Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, a couple former teammates of his already with the Packers going into their third seasons, and it's just, again, like you said, where I feel like with this guy, I hope. It sounds like Darnell Savage, where Darnell Savage was better when he was closer to the football. Javon Bullard may be the same guy. I just hope we don't screw it up with this. Just don't overthink it and play him at his strength. And you gotta think that Jeff Hafley is not going to try to make these guys play in areas or play roles that they're not comfortable with. He's going to play guys at where their strengths are. So you may see a guy like a Javon Bullard eventually blossom into a pretty nice run defender as a defensive back in this defense.
Yeah, and again, if you can get a safety who's not afraid to play in the box, who's not afraid to help out against the run, that's really good. Maybe the biggest concern about Bullard, you mentioned, 5'10", 198 pounds. Mm-hmm. Can his body take the pounding that a physical safety is going to have to take at the next level?
Only time will tell, but on paper, I love the pick. I love the round 2 picks. Then going into round 3, the Packers owned picks 88 and 91. 91 was from the Buffalo Bills in the Rasul Douglas trade during the 2023 season. With pick 88, they picked USC running back Marshawn Lloyd, ran for 820 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2023. He is 23 years old, a little bit older, 5'9", 209, but ran a 4.46 40. He did tear his ACL in 2020, but you got to believe that the Packers did their homework on his medicals, and they feel good about where the knee is at, obviously structurally, and he's going to provide some competition right away in that offensive backfield.
The thing that's amazing to me, 7.1 yard average last year at USC. You don't see that all that often. And, it's funny because you read all the different scouting reports, and one scout said, "Oh, he reminds me of a younger Josh Jacobs." Well, now he may be the complement to Josh Jacobs, and it's a very, very interesting pickup there. The one thing about Marshawn Lloyd, he has never been sort of a workhorse kind of a back. Mm-hmm. He's not the kind of guy who gets the ball 25 times a game, but anytime he touches the ball, he is a threat. He's shifty. He cuts quickly. In addition to Josh Jacobs, maybe there's there's a little Aaron Jones in his build also.
Yeah, and with Marshawn Lloyd, another thing, you wonder with the high yards per carry, and I was looking at that, where it's like, oh, hey, that's impressive. How much of that was Caleb Williams, though? Because right. Caleb Williams, obviously, number 1 overall pick, a Heisman Trophy winner at USC, deservedly so. The guy was a phenomenal college football player. How much of that was having Caleb Williams on your team? And then the year before that, having Jordan Addison at wide receiver and having a lot of talent on that USC offense. But he was, albeit he was a very productive player at USC. The only issue possibly with this is that he did have some fumbling problems in college. That's something, obviously, ball security is a thing that the Packers were pretty darn good with last year, especially with how young of an offense it was. So if Marshawn Lloyd, let's say, we get into the preseason and he's struggling securing the ball in preseason games or practices, that could be a potential problem because obviously the ball is more important than anything else when when you're running an offense, you want to have possession. You don't want to give that football up to the other team. A strength, though, that he could catch passes out of the backfield. That's obviously a positive. It's going to be interesting to see, though, as a rookie running back, can he pass protect? Because running backs got to be able to pass protect, especially when you got a franchise quarterback like Jordan Love.
And that may be the thing that keeps him off the field significantly as a rookie. If he doesn't learn pass protection, and I'll go back to Aaron Jones, who struggled as a rookie in pass pro and worked his tail off to make sure that he got better at it. And eventually that did get him that bigger role. And, this is a challenge that Marshawn Lloyd is going to have to accept, holding onto the football and pass protection. If he can get those two things down, the sky is the limit for this kid.
And you gotta watch the offense, the running back position group next year during camp in the preseason. That's going to be a very fun battle because Josh Jacobs is honestly the only one whose job is safe. And Josh Jacobs has been a very productive back in the NFL, but A.J. Dillon, there's no guarantee he's going to make the team. Emmanuel Wilson, there's no guarantee he's going to make the team. Now you got Marshawn, and now you got this running back, Marshawn Lloyd, who has talent, but third rounders don't always make it. It's very uncommon that a third rounder gets cut right away after their first training camp as a rookie. But if he has fumbling issues, that could be a problem. If A.J. Dillon if he seems to be regressing and not progressing or not getting, or even not staying the level that he was at last year, he could get cut. Emmanuel Wilson, if he was just a flash in the pan, he could get cut as well. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential scenarios that could happen in that offensive backfield. Who knows? They may keep 4 running backs. It's a mystery, but it's going to be very intriguing. And I don't think the Packers are done drafting running backs yet this weekend.
I agree. And, the one thing about A.J. Dillon that may help him, and again, it depends on whether or not they add another running back on day 3 of the draft. His body type, his running style differs from the other 3. Mm-hmm. And that may be enough to keep him on the roster if he makes a decent showing. Now, we talked yesterday after day 1 of the draft about, okay, maybe on day 3, we're looking at a fullback H-back. That could have an effect on A.J. Dillon's ability to make the roster, depending on what role they want him in. But, maybe there is someone out there who's going to compete with him for that inside between the tackles, short yardage kind of a role. But, right now, the thing is, I think with Jacobs, with Lloyd, and with Wilson, you have 3 similar styles of running back.
Yeah, and a big thing that I think that we're going to probably see maybe in training camp, it depends how Saturday goes with rounds 4 through 7. If they try to draft a specific H-back type, if they possibly think about putting A.J. Dillon in that H-back role, a guy who could possibly run on the backfield, he's shown that he could catch the ball. It's not his strength, but he's able to do it. He can pass protect as well. There's a lot that you could do with A.J. Dillon, possibly in an H-back role if the Packers feel like that could be a benefit. That's a good way to possibly keep all these running backs in-house moving forward. So it's going to be very interesting, an interesting battle going forward with that. That's definitely on the offense. Obviously, offensive line, that's going to be a good battle that we're going to see, hey, how's that going to shake out, that first starting 5 when the NFL season kicks off next year in Brazil for the Green Bay Packers. But running back battle is going to be very intriguing and worth watching for sure. But pick 91, the final pick for the Packers on day 2, they picked Mizzou linebacker Tyron Hopper, so doubling up at linebacker. Hopper, 6'2", 231 pounds, started his collegiate career at Florida before transferring to Mizzou. Last season for the Tigers, second team all SEC for a great Mizzou team. A great Mizzou team that ended up winning the Cotton Bowl over The Ohio State University. 7.38 relative athletic score. Gil, what do you make of this pick? That linebacker room all of a sudden got a little more crowded after Friday's day 2.
Yeah, and I like the linebacker, pick. I think we needed to draft at least 2 linebackers. I'm a little surprised they took him in round 3. I thought that Hopper would be more of a 4th or maybe even early 5th round pick. But there are a lot of things to like about him. And I think, special teams may be where he helps out initially as a rookie.
And hey, this guy's got speed. He's really fast. Does he have? Is this more so a Rich Bisaccia pick? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. This may very well be a guy who, will add a little depth at linebacker, but is primarily, especially this year as a rookie, going to make his bread and butter on special teams.
Now, I do have a buddy, a close friend of mine for a long time, who is a Mizzou alum. He's a big Mizzou football fan as well. And I asked him, I was like, hey, you watched every Mizzou football game. What can you tell me about Tyron Hopper? And he said he's solid, had an ankle injury toward the end of last season, didn't play the last 3 or 4 games. Not having him was always a concern because he was a big difference maker. He was a great replacement for Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, now with the Kansas City Chiefs, and a very good defensive player in the NFL for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kind of reminds me of him, and look how good Nick Bolton is. And he said Hopper is actually faster than Nick Bolton. So that's some promising, encouraging words. And again, Mizzou was a team that kind of came out of nowhere in the SEC last year, and they've had a lot of draft. Darius Robinson, an edge rusher, went round 1 from that Mizzou defense. Ennis Rakestraw went round 2 on Friday. And then you have Tyron Hopper. So clearly they had a lot of talent on that side of the ball, and a lot of talent just in general on that team, where teams are like, hey, like, we should probably see what they got cooking down in Columbia, Missouri.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So here we are through 2 days of the draft. What would you say so far out of the 5 players the Packers have picked, or maybe out of the players they picked, or maybe out of the players or positions they did not address, what has surprised you the most so far?
I don't know if anything's been surprising. This has been actually what everyone was kind of hoping for. Add some O-line depth, get a running back, get some defensive help. They've done a little bit of everything that I was expecting. And I will say the best thing, though, that to come out of this draft for the Packers is, and as a Packer fan too, no defensive tackles were drafted by the Packers on the first 2 days. That's a great sign for Kenny Clark's future. Also, predominantly no corners were drafted as well. That's a great sign for Eric Stokes' health. So that was a concern where the cornerback group where we're thinking, hey, is Carrington Valentine really going to be a solid answer? Is Eric Stokes ever going to be back to his normal self from what we saw as a rookie, where he was actually pretty good? Is he going to get back to that? That's a good sign if they were not if they did not really target those areas where, hey, we may have a future at these position groups right now with these guys, and we don't have to panic or hit the panic button anytime soon.
So here's my question. Historically, there is one position that the Packers have hit home runs with in the 4th round. What do you think the odds are we see an offensive lineman in round 4?
Oh, I think significant, especially because they did not go with any O linemen on day 2.
Correct.
And they obviously, it's a huge need for depth purposes. And they got that guy in round 1. They got a guy who they feel very strong about. And people were saying, oh, Jordan Morgan was a reach. They could have waited a round 2. But there are reports that the Commanders are trying to trade up and draft Jordan Morgan. I think there are a couple other teams who want to trade up into round 1 and draft Jordan Morgan. Again, we don't know what these NFL GMs and front offices are thinking, as opposed to us as fans and us sitting on sitting on the couch eating Pop-Tarts at night. It's like we don't know any better. They have more data and information than we could ever imagine. But I think definitely O-line is going to be a big point of emphasis and on day 3. And you got a couple extra picks from the New Orleans Saints. It's more opportunity to get deeper on the O-line, and Brian Gutekunst has done a pretty good job finding gems late in the draft when it comes to the O-line and building that lineup.
Yeah, day 3 has been a gold mine. I mean, you look at Zach Tom, your 2 starting tackles. Mm-hmm. Zach Tom, what was it, 4th round for Zach Tom, 7th round for Rasheed Wallace, Walker rather. Not bad at all as far as finding those gems late in the draft for your offensive line. And the good thing is now that there is not a lot of pressure for any of these guys to step in and start right away.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely not. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't mean to barge in right there, but you got even John Runyon Jr. was a day 3 pick.
Yes.
Mark Tauscher was a day 3 pick. David Bakhtiari was a day 3 pick. TJ Lang was a day 3 pick. Josh Sitton was a day 3 pick. Corey Lindsley was a day 3 pick. These guys, and it's the same thinking they've had since Ron Wolf took over in the early 90s. Since he took over as the Green Bay Packers general manager, it's just been his brainchild that has essentially run this organization since then, in the front office since then. And they think the same way, and they are able to find O-line talent late, and they do such a good job of it. You got to feel good about their chances that they're going to definitely draft some guys. I do wonder going into day 3, which quarterback they're going to select. Spencer Rattler from South Carolina is the consensus number 7 QB, and Brian Gutekunst talked about building that quarterback room. If Spencer Rattler drops late 4th round, if he drops 5th round, maybe Brian Gutekunst uses a pick on him. I'm just saying he wants to get back to building up the quarterback room and building the competition behind Jordan Love, just in case something were to happen, or if you could possibly trade a guy down the road for extra draft capital in future drafts. But quarterback could be a pick tomorrow or on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it will be a pick on Saturday. It's just a question of whether it's, in my mind, 5th round at the earliest, but we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Wouldn't be shocked if it's a 4th round pick, but I think 5th, 6th, or 7th round, especially with the extra picks that Goody just acquired, it just gives him more bites at the apple. I mean, now you have 13 picks overall in this draft. Not bad for a team with no, immediate needs that are so that you're so desperate that you don't need to do it. Some other positions, I think we will see a cornerback also being drafted.
I do too.
You know,
I do too.
I think day 3 we'll see at least one corner, and we may see another safety.
Yeah, build up that DB room. That's fine. At this point, you're essentially they're throwing darts at the wall essentially at this point, and you're taking a chance on guys, and you're taking a chance on guys who may not have the measurables but have the talent. Carl Brooks was a prime example last year. Dontavion Wicks, prime example, where a freak athlete but just didn't have the production in college, and now looks like he's going to be a pretty damn good NFL receiver. And we're lucky to have him, and we're lucky that Brian Gutekunst found him. But it's going to be an interesting day 3. A lot of picks to mess with, and Brian Gutekunst too. His pre-draft presser. Those pre-draft pressers for GMs are usually a lot of smoke. They're usually pointless, but he did say, I'm hoping to have 13, 14 picks after the weekend wraps up. And that's exactly where they stand right now. So that's great. And, and someone mentioned where there's only so many spots available on the Packer roster, but you know what? I'd rather cut a lot of good players than keep a lot of bad players. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I prefer that. Yeah.
One thing I think we have to look for, and it's just a pattern that we've seen Goody do over the last few drafts, and I think it's worked out very well. A lot of the time, the Packers have been drafting guys who, in their, I'm going to say junior year, but next to last year, were very productive. And whether it was because of injury or some other coaching change, system change, all of a sudden the receiver lost his quarterback, whatever it is, they weren't as productive the last year in college. But you have the relative athletic score is high. The production is there a year prior. And all of a sudden, you talked about Dontavion Wicks. You talk about, guys like that where they develop in the pros after slumping a little bit in their last year in college.
And that's what it seems like that's what a lot of NFL GMs, that's the approach they take. But Packers seem to be hitting on it lately. Hopefully that luck continues. But Gil, real quick, an update on our draft crushes that we had in previous episodes. As of day 2, as of Saturday morning, if you're listening to this before day 3 kicks off, all of our draft crushes have been drafted. Cooper Beebe, the Kansas State guard, got drafted 73rd overall by Dallas. Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from NC State, got drafted 98th overall by Pittsburgh. Cooper DeJean, we mentioned, drafted 40th overall by the Eagles. We will see him week 1 in Brazil. Kool-Aid McKinstry was drafted 41st overall by New Orleans after the Packers traded that pick, which they acquired from the Rodgers trade, to the Saints to gain extra picks. And then your boy, Junior Colson, the linebacker from Michigan, drafted by the Chargers. He's reunited with his former head coach, Jim Harbaugh, in LA. So all those guys are gone. Gil, any surprises in general from the draft today?
I think the second linebacker was a little bit of a surprise to me. I was sort of expecting the Packers to handle that on day 3, but I totally understand why you would want to fortify it on day 2. How
Yeah,
about you?
and for me, it was Cooper DeJean falling to number 40, where clearly teams were not as high on him as a lot of people were. And I think there's just some issues medically, possibly, and just maybe some issues that on tape where teams are like, I don't know about this. But second round, yeah, why not? But maybe not a first round pick. And then also Atlanta today picking a defensive tackle from Clemson, Rook Oro, and I doubt I'm saying that right. He was picked at number 35 ahead of Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, Jerzon Newton, a guy who I would have loved to have seen in a Packer
Yeah.
uniform because I remember watching him against the Wisconsin Badgers this year, and a lot of Badger fans probably remember that too, where that guy was an absolute wrecking ball. He was a one-man wrecking crew. He was dominating the Wisconsin Badgers by himself, and then he got ejected for targeting, and it was kind of a BS targeting call, and targeting, that's a discussion for another day. Targeting is just, it's very controversial in the college game, and we're going to not go beyond that, but when he left the game, Wisconsin ended up coming back and winning. And that was because Jerzon Newton wasn't on the field. That's a guy who's a very versatile defensive lineman. And I was surprised that the Falcons, essentially, the draft that they're having right now reminded me of the Packers 2020 draft when Jordan Love was drafted when no one expected. A.J. Dillon seemed to be a reach in the second round at running back. Kamal Martin, a guy who a lot of people expected to be undrafted, was a fifth-round pick. And Kamal Martin did. Amari Rodgers was later, though. Amari Rodgers
Third
was
round.
No, Josiah DeGuara was third round.
Oh, right, DeGuara. Yeah.
Yeah, Josiah and people were surprised about that too. So it seems like the Falcons have kind of taken the Packers blueprint from the 2020 draft and doing that this year. Just a lot of questionable decisions on paper, but again, we don't know as much as these guys. So who knows? They may have the best draft out of everybody in a few years, and only time will tell. But any guys, though, available right now on the prospect board, on the big board that you would like to possibly see in a Packer uniform on Saturday?
I haven't really thought about that specifically just because we were recording so soon after the end of the third round. So,
yeah.
I really don't have any names at this point. How about you?
Quarterback TJ Tampa from Iowa State. He's still available. Matt Campbell is a terrific coach at Iowa State. That guy is bound to go to a much larger program one day. He's so good, and he's so good at preparing guys for the NFL, especially he's a great defensive mind. And TJ Tampa was a really good corner at Iowa State. If the Packers do look to draft a corner, TJ Tampa would be worth possibly taking a shot at and adding to that defensive back room. And then some other guys who would be kind of fun to add if we had a Jerry Rice's kid, wide receiver Brendan Rice late, or former NFL linebacker Jeremiah Trotter. His son, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., is still available. Tanner Bortolini and Braylon Allen, a couple Wisconsin Badgers. Iowa seems to always produce really great NFL tight ends. Maybe take a chance on tight end Eric All. Who knows? And Eric All was also a former Michigan Wolverine, Gil. You obviously remember him. And if you need some tight end depth, if you need a guy who could possibly fill an H-back role, why not draft a guy who was at Iowa? Because Iowa seems to put something in their pudding or something in the food there to make all the tight ends really good and the O-linemen really good and good defensive players. Outside that, they're kind of a mess and kind of vanilla. But take a chance on one of those guys. But the previous NFL connections with Brendan Rice and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I'm not saying go get those guys, but it'd be kind of funny to see that and it would make me feel old because I watched their dads play in the NFL. So it would just be like, okay, like, all right, that's neat. Their kids are playing now and I'm here.
It does make you feel old. I still have not had a grandchild of a player I saw when I was very young play in this league, but I'm sure it will happen at some point.
Give it some time. It'll happen for both of us, Gil. So we're gonna be here for a while, hopefully. But obviously, Gil, busy time, draft weekend. Any new articles on Packers Post, Cheesehead TV? I bet you're pretty busy, and I got to think that you're gonna have some stuff coming up after the draft concludes this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, for Packers Post, I have an article up already about 10 things we learned from day one for the Packers, and tomorrow or Saturday I'll have 10 things we learned from day 2. So I'll break down the picks, how they fit in with the Packers. And obviously on Cheesehead, we're getting some real quick, immediate draft coverage out there, breaking down all the Packers picks. So definitely look for that. And yeah, this is the biggest weekend of the offseason. So I am very excited by everything that we're seeing right now.
The Cheesehead TV stuff has been great. The draft coverage has been really good. It's just nice little bullet points to know, hey, what to expect of this kid and what we know about the guys who are in. So, again, just to recap real quick, the Packers on day 2, 4 picks overall. They picked Texas A&M linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, Georgia safety Javon Bullard, USC running back Marshawn Lloyd, and Mizzou linebacker Tyron Hopper. Rounds 4 through 7 are on Saturday. And we're not going to be back with another podcast until our regular schedule, until next week. We'll recap the full draft and our reactions and everything coming up next week. So obviously a fun time of year, but we still got plenty of time to go. And hey, next week, that's when Jordan Love's eligible for an extension. Maybe we'll talk about that.
Going to be interesting, and I'm sure they'll reach an extension with him sooner rather than later. Before training camp gets underway, I expect him to be extended, and hopefully Kenny Clark as well.
Crossing my fingers, big time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, well, that's it for today. We'll be right back here next week at our regular time. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packers Sean. Stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you could email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you subscribe to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. A big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. Thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.